All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining our first ever AMA of the year. We've had AMAs before on the Donald and on Donald Trump subreddits, and we've always wanted to do an AMA in Discord, but we could never figure out how quite to do it with the voice chat channel. And Discord came up with this wonderful stage feature. So everybody gets to stay in the stage, treat it like a town hall. And we want to say thank you for Mr. Kent for joining us for our first ever AMA. Joe Kent is running for Washington's 3rd District, Washington State, that is. And he's trying to unseat a rhino who voted against or voted for impeachment of President Trump. I'm going to let Joe go ahead and tell us about himself, give us his background, and kind of a bit about his platform. And then after that's done, we can go ahead and take questions. And the questions will show up on the side, Mr. Kent. And from there, we'll bring people on the stage to go ahead and ask the question. Sound good?
Yeah, sounds great. Thank you.
All right. It's yours.
All right. Sounds good. So thank you guys for hosting this. This is pretty neat. My first time on Discord, and thank you to everybody for being here this evening. Looking forward to hearing all your questions. So my name is Joe Kent. I grew up in the Pacific Northwest. Far back as I can remember, I wanted to join the military and to go fight for this country. I was always deeply inspired by the stories of those who had gone before us and sacrificed overseas so we can enjoy peace back here in the United States. So when I turned 18, I enlisted in the Army, worked my way into Ranger Regiment and then into Special Forces. So a few years later, our country changed drastically on September 11th, 2001. When that happened, I was exactly where I wanted to be in special operations. That set a cycle for the next almost 2 decades of continuous combat for me. I deployed to combat 11 times. In between combat deployments, I met my late wife, Shannon Kent. She was a fellow special operator and a fellow warrior. We met together in the military. Quickly bonded, started our family. We both intended to continue to serve this country abroad, overseas, fighting our enemies, because we believed in everything this country stands for, and we believed that it was our job and our role in this society to go defend it. That all changed a little bit over 2 years ago when Shannon was killed fighting ISIS in Manbij, Syria. So Shannon was killed at a pretty pivotal time in President Trump's presidency. And in our nation's history. So we had just defeated the territorial caliphate right after Shannon deployed on the deployment. And shortly thereafter, we defeated the territorial caliphate and President Trump tried to get us out of Syria. And that's when we all saw the permanent political class and unelected bureaucrats turn against President Trump, starting Secretary of Defense Jim Mattis and many other unelected bureaucrats in the State Department and all throughout the government that turned on him and started to present the narrative that President Trump did not know what he was doing as far as foreign policy went, and that he was somehow a threat to our country as he tried to end a cycle of our endless wars. So seeing all that, despite all the personal grief I was going through, having just lost my wife, I knew that I had to start speaking out because I spent, like I said, a little bit at that time, a little bit over 20 years in special operations. I had recently transitioned after my military retirement into a career in the CIA, working counterterrorism. And I knew that President Trump's approach to our foreign policy was the correct approach, that he was putting our country first. He was free from the ideological shackles of the neocons, the neoliberal ideology, and he was free from the influence of the military-industrial complex. So I felt that it was my duty to start speaking out. So I took every opportunity I could to articulate President Trump's foreign policy, why it was not only the right thing to do as far as fulfilling a campaign promise goes, but also it was the right thing to do as far as our stance and our best way to approach counterterrorism, international relations, in particular in the Middle East, and against our larger adversaries of Russia and China. So I started writing op-eds, going on the news, that type of thing. I developed an informal relationship because President Trump is an informal unconventional president on advising on counterterrorism matters in the Middle East with the Trump administration, and had a job offer to go work in a second Trump administration. And then we all saw what happened in 2020 when the culmination of big tech, the mainstream media, and again, unelected bureaucrats, the permanent ruling class of our society, essentially turned against the American people and presented the narrative that Joe Biden had won an overwhelming majority, despite all the widespread fraud, widespread discrepancies that we saw. So seeing all that, I knew that I needed to do something. I had never intended on going into politics, running for office, that type of thing. I felt my role was, kind of the shadows based on my experience fighting overseas. But my experience fighting overseas and being a Green Beret gave me a unique perspective on what the left is doing right now. The cultural assault that they're running, the media assault they're running, the information assault that they're running right now. These are the exact same techniques that I was trained to identify and trained to exploit against repressive regimes and terrorist organizations as a Green Beret and as a member of the Central Intelligence Agency. So I see what the left is doing for what it is. It's an attempt to erode every single institution, every single part of our society that's supposed to ensure our freedoms, to give them total and complete control. So from Al-Qaeda to ISIS, all the way to repressive regimes, the same tactics and techniques are used the world over. So seeing all this, I knew that I had to stand up and act. And then when my representative, the woman who I voted for because she was a Republican, sided with the Democrats, sided with the narrative that the left was pushing, that there had been this massive insurrection that Trump had cheered on, and had cited it despite what we all saw and what we all see to be extremely clear now that more of that timeline has been exposed. When she came out and she voted for that impeachment, to me, it was a critical moment because I was like, well, there's my sign. I now know that I am called to action, to step up and to go take her on, and then to take on the Republican establishment and take on the far left to get our country back in order. Because the bottom line is I have two very young sons who lost their mother when they were 1 and 3 years old. So sometime in the near future, probably in about 5 or 6 years, I'm going to have to look them in the eyes and explain to them that this is the nation that their mother gave her life for. And the direction that we're heading right now, the state that we're in right now, I can't do that. So I have to take action. So here I am. That's brought me to this point. The threat and the assault that I see on our society, again, it's cultural. It's the media war. The left has been on a slow march through all of our institutions for the past several decades, and it's all coming to a head right now. COVID gave them a gift that they totally and completely exploited to lock down our society, to take away our First Amendment rights. They're going after all of our other rights. They're trying to totally break down the nuclear family because that's a major threat to them. The economic warfare that the left and the right has waged on the working and the middle class of this country for decades has come back into full light because Joe Biden had to go and set back the policies that President Trump put into place that were beginning to halt the massive transfer of wealth and the massive managed decline that our nation was in, because the left and the right sold us the false bill of goods that shipping all of our manufacturing and all of our jobs and all of the drivers of economic success overseas, that would be in our best interest, that because we would be able to have lower labor costs overseas, that we'd be able to buy more cheap goods back here in the States, and that would somehow be good for our economy. The left came in with the religion of environmentalism and killed off all of our actual production industries. So out here in the Pacific Northwest, they wreaked havoc on our timber industry. They killed off a major part of our economy. They killed off small towns. They destroyed lives with this religion of environmentalism. The same thing can be said throughout the country with the energy sector. The left told us those jobs are gone. They're never coming back. And that if you want to get ahead in life, you need to go ahead and apply to college, try to get into college. And if you can get into college, just take massive student debt if that's what it takes, because at the end of it, there'll be technology jobs waiting for you. So we have a whole generation, essentially the millennials and on, that took on all this college debt because they were told that the jobs that their fathers and their grandfathers had that actually produced things and made this country wealthy, that those jobs were gone, but they had these other great white collar jobs waiting for them, these tech sector jobs. So they took the debt. And then they got out of college with this massive amount of debt. And now most of those jobs have either been shipped overseas, or we've had legal immigration come in with foreign workers and take those jobs because our corporate ruling class and our political ruling class have benefited from legal labor to undercut, once again, the working in the middle class. And so this economic trap that we're in right now has killed off our economy, and it's made us vulnerable to China. So while we were over trying to build democracies out of Arab militias and Pashtun tribes in the Middle East for no gain, China completely and totally exploited the gift that the American ruling class, the Bidens, the Clintons, the Bushes, and the Cheneys gave to them right before 9/11 in the year 2000, when they signed the Normalcy of China Act and allowed China into the World Trade Organization. They took that time when we were distracted overseas to become an economic powerhouse, mostly at our expense because they don't play by any rules. And now we're in this position where our economy doesn't produce anything. We rely on people, other nations like China and the Gulf Emirates, to buy off our debt. And now we're in this position where the Chinese can stop buying our debt. They can undercut our status as the world's prime reserve holder, and they can take down our entire economy, our entire system, without even firing a shot. So seeing the totality of this is why I'm in this fight, and this is why I want to talk to as many people as I can in the district, throughout the nation, to start building a network, just like I would do in the military as a Green Beret, to try and build a network to push back against the repressive tactics that our government is currently taking against us, and that the left is currently taking against us, and that the establishment Republicans are doing nothing about and continue to do nothing about. So my number one goal is to get rid of Jamie Herrera Butler. She's the representative in my district. I want to take her seat to restore the people's voice back to Washington, D.C. So I am absolutely honored to be here tonight. So looking forward to your questions. That was kind of a long-winded who I am and why I'm asking for people's votes.
No, I think it was perfect. And you said you had mentioned that you'd talked to President Trump about your campaign. Could you tell us a little bit about that, how it went and what you talked about, and some of the other things that you talked with President Trump about?
Yeah, certainly. So I've had the amazing honor of getting to know President Trump on a personal level, and his family and some of his closest staffers over the years. So President Trump came to Dover after my wife was killed. My wife lost her life alongside three other great Americans. So President Trump and his entire national security team came out to Dover when my wife and the other three Americans' bodies were returned. And just before the flight arrived, a staffer came by and said, hey, that President Trump would meet with the families one-on-one if any of the families would like to. And so I said, yeah, I had been a Trump supporter for quite a while. He had reinvigorated my faith in the American political system, essentially, when he came and he upended the Republican system. So I was eager to meet him, especially, again, I mentioned where we were at in that time in history with the Syria withdrawal. And I just wanted to tell him that I felt that he was doing the right thing, and to thank him for coming out there. And so I thought it was going to be a meet and greet. I had never met a president before, but in the military, I'd met generals and stuff like that. And it's usually very scripted. And so I figured meeting the president would be the same way. But Donald Trump is a very different president than we've ever had before. So I get taken into a private room by the Secret Service. And 1 minute later, President Trump just walks in. And he was very gracious. And, you know, I could tell that he had really read up on Shannon and the other Americans who lost their lives that day. And so he grieved with me. And then he asked me my background. I told him what my background was. And I shared with him that, hey, I thought that he was doing the right thing in the Middle East. And I really appreciated what he was trying to do, and that he was not getting the support at the higher levels that he needed. So from there, we kind of started a very informal relationship, like I said. So I had met him a few other times before, so I have a little bit of a relationship with him. When I went out to Mar-a-Lago about 3 weeks ago at this point, I just, he knew I was running for this seat against one of the 10 Republicans who voted for his impeachment. So I briefed him. I said, here's where we're at. Here's what I'm seeing in my district. So my district is a very Republican district. Jamie Herrera Butler has been our congresswoman for about 10 years now, but I told him, hey, the people of the 3rd Congressional District are furious at her. They're furious at the direction that our country's heading in, and they want the policies of President Trump back. Like, people are still flying their Trump flags out here. There's still a huge movement that knows that our country has to get back on track by putting America first, by supporting our people with our resources to give ourselves as much of a fighting chance as we possibly can. So I articulated that back to him. I told him what my plan was for getting my name recognition out, and then for getting my fundraising up, because at the end of the day, President Trump, he is a success-driven person. He wants to see that you have a plan to win and an ability to win. So I told him, hey, so far I've been in pretty much every county in my district. I've been to multiple town halls. I'm doing as many as I possibly can. I'm doing as many media hits as I possibly can. I have a pretty deliberate fundraising plan that we're executing as well. So I briefed him on that. He was, very receptive. He had some sharp questions that he always asks about, the policies of the day. So we talked about foreign policy a little bit, because that's kind of what my background was with him. But then we also talked about a lot of the economic issues that we're facing right now, especially trying to come out of COVID by simply paying people not to work. I told him about the very local issues we're having here. He was very receptive, and he said his gut was going with providing me with the endorsement soon. He just wanted to make sure that I could continue to raise funds. So that's kind of the brief synopsis of the discussion we had.
Well, you heard him, people. Make sure you donate to Mr. Kemp for Congress. I will, for sure.
Absolutely.
JoeKempForCongress.com.
JoeKempForCongress.com.
Yep, for sure. And we'll give you plenty of opportunity to show us where that's at and let us know. Knox, you had something you wanted to bring up real quick?
Yeah, thanks so much. And also, Joe, just thanks again. I wasn't here during the first beginning, so I just wanted to welcome you again. Also, thank you for your tweet. We've had a couple dozen people that we weren't able to fully vet into our server. Like I shared with them, we're not Democrats. We just don't let anybody in over here. But nice. They're here, they're listening. So to those of you just joining us, we will be taking questions from our vetted users. I don't know if we'll be able to get to any of the unvetted users, but for everybody, again, just keep it respectful, keep it focused. Joe is sharing time with us that he could be out fundraising or talking to other officials. So keep it focused, keep it short, so that he can answer as many questions as possible. So we're going to go ahead and get started with that.
Okay, Nux, I'll let you go ahead and pick the first question. You ready to go with the questions, Joe? Or
yeah, let's go for it.
All right.
All right. Well, we're going to start at the top of the list. We're going to start off with KMOX and keep it short, KMOX. So we'll invite him to speak, and hopefully he is there to accept that invitation.
All right, Joe Kemp, I have two questions for you. What would you do to stop critical race theory and 1619 project in schools?
And your second question?
That's a great question. So from the... Oh.
My second question is, do you think that people with disabilities but can function should serve in the America's military?
Okay, I'll go with the CRT one first. So from the federal perspective, I think the best way that we can absolutely rid our education system of CRT 1619, this Planned Parenthood agenda, and then the transgender agenda, first and foremost, is to kill off the Department of Education. There's absolutely nothing in the Constitution at the federal level about the Department of Education. For lack thereof, we aggressively go after all education grants, and anything that touches on any of those issues, we deny the grants. We do everything we can to exercise Congress's ability to cut off funding, and then to promote more traditional and patriotic education curriculums. But also the military right now and the federal government have gone absolutely insane. I think it's all very deliberate. I think it's aimed at gaining control and seeing who's going to pledge their allegiance to the new woke doctrine. That's why I think they're pushing CRT so heavily in the military. So Congress needs to go after that aggressively. The Armed Services Committee should be holding these senior leaders, these generals, the Secretary of Defense, hold their feet to the fire on and expose why they're pushing these agendas into the ranks of our troops, especially the stuff coming out of CRT the Black Lives Matter movement, its Marxist origins. I mean, Marxism is a sworn enemy of democracy. The military is supposed to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. They can't do that when they're being fed a doctrine that is inherently anti-American, anti-democratic. I didn't quite catch the rest of the second part of the question, unfortunately. I think it had something to do with trans.
No,
I think it's,
go ahead.
go ahead, Knox.
All right, for the second question, I think what K-Mox was asking along the lines of, do you think that people who may have some level of disability but are fully functioning, maybe they're on the autism spectrum, but their desire is to serve this country and serve the military, that there's a role for them in military service?
Yeah, I do. The military is doing a pretty good job of we've traditionally done a pretty good job in the military of determining who's fit for service and who's fit for what types of service. I wouldn't want to take that out of the hands of the military, but this is all the more reason why we kind of have to get the military back under control with the doctrine they're being fed right now. But yeah, to keep it simple, I do think there's a role for folks that have a disability but still want to serve.
Okay, great. Thanks so much.
Thanks,
Next
Kate,
up,
for the questions.
yeah, thanks, K-Mox. Next up is Nick Debt.
Hi, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. And especially you, Mr. Kent. Thank you for your service, and especially your wife with the upcoming Memorial Day. I'll make sure.
All right, do you have a question, Nick Debt?
Yes, I have one question to ask tonight. Mr. Kent, will you work towards abolishing the unconstitutional NFA, including all the following acts and laws that are put in place to oppress the gun owners of America?
An easy one. Yes. The Second Amendment is very clear. And the Second Amendment's the only gun law that we need.
All right, short and sweet. Thanks, Nick Debt. Thanks, Joe. Next up is Carlos.
Can you guys hear me?
We can.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Joe, thank you very much for being here for this AMA with our group. I wanted to say I was in attendance at your late wife's service at the Naval Academy in 2019, and it was a beautiful event after quite a tragedy. I've been dialed into your campaign since I saw your name pop up, and I have two quick questions for you. First, have you had any resistance from the GOP of Washington? And as a secondary question, have you had any challenges fundraising? I know my mom has already sent you a $100 check.
Thank you for attending the service, and then thank your mother for the kind donation. So I wouldn't say I've had resistance from Washington State GOP. I think we're just living in a kind of an unprecedented time for most people that are involved in Republican politics, because there's a good deal of anger at the establishment right now. But the party knows that, and they're working to change their bylaws right now, because we have two of the 10 rhinos in Washington State, Jamie Herrera Butler and Dan Newhouse, both are Republicans in theory, who voted for the impeachment of President Trump. So I think we're going to see some more support from the GOP that we wouldn't otherwise see as challenges, as folks challenging an incumbent. So yeah, as of right now, they've been kind of silent on what's going on right now, but I think that's going to change soon, I hope, because I think the Trump movement, they cannot deny. And then fundraising. So the biggest challenge fundraising is just getting the word out. So that's what we're trying to do right here. I put up $200,000 of my own money, just so that when I ask people to donate, that I'm not asking them to do something I wouldn't do myself. So just really word of mouth and trying to get out as many individual donations as we can. That's been the big push.
Right. Awesome. Thanks so much for that question. Thank you, Joe. And Joe, we're just going to try and roll through these as quick as possible. So if you need to take a breath, if you have another thought you want to get into, just let me know, and we'll slow this down a little bit if need be.
Okay. Yeah.
But next up, we have Champ. Welcome, Champ. What's your question?
Hey, Nux, thanks. Joe, thanks for coming out. My name's Mike, and just wanted to thank you for your 20 years of service in SOCOM to our country and its Constitution. For the context of my question, in my fighter squadron and many other combative units across the DoD, insider threats has always been a huge upcoming and growing threat to operations, technology, and tactics. Example being, many of our fifth-generation stealth fighter tech, missiles, and radars over the years have been leaked to China, and China has been recently developing technology that has challenged our air superiority. So, question being, how would you ensure that your colleagues, both in Congress and DoD contractors alike, who are knowledgeable of classified or top secret information, don't sell out our intel and technology to the Chinese, Russians, or any other adversaries alike?
So I think we need to absolutely purge the foreign influence from the defense sector, and that primarily starts with China because of how much we've sold our ability to produce technology to the Chinese, and that starts with getting them out of the education sector, getting them out of the universities, getting them out of STEM. So we have to purge that. That's going to be hard. That's going to take some time. And then before we give up classified information to elected officials, I think they need to go through the same vetting process that those of us in the community would go through to make sure they're trustworthy, to make sure they're not sleeping with a Chinese spy. That's just real basic stuff. So I think it's going to start with a good, some serious counterintelligence reviews of everywhere the Chinese are in our technology chain. And then the same thing with members of Congress that are given classified information.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Sham, for that question. Thank you, Joe. And I think all of us know here who that reference to the Chinese spy was about. So, all right, we have Pranav up next. Let's see. I just sent that invite. There he is. Hey, Pranav.
Hi, Mr. Kent. So I'm a university student in the state of California, and what you said about leftism affecting universities and my state is 100% correct. I've seen environmentalism actually destroy my state. But I've been a huge fan since I've seen your announcement on Twitter, and it's finally time that I can meet you. But so I have two questions. So question number one, what really triggered you to run for the U.S. House? And the challenge is it can't be that Representative Butler voted in favor of impeachment. And my second question is, when pressure comes on when you're making laws, and we've seen too many politicians cave into the establishment and turn down what the representatives want. So do you believe that you are the right choice and that you can stand the pressure that sometimes Washington can put on you?
Yeah, so for your first question, Representative Butler voting for the impeachment of President Trump was probably the straw that broke the camel's back. Like I said, I had not intended to go into politics. I wanted to do something to get active just because of everything that we see that's happened in the year 2020. So I've just never been somebody who can sit on the sidelines, and the easiest thing to me seemed to be to say, well, someone should go fix this, but I don't want to run for office, because really, who wants to run for office? It's not I think if you want to run for office, you probably shouldn't be running for office. And then as far as the political pressure goes, I am trying to be as clear and honest as I can be about my stances on the issues. And again, this is not, I've already had a career. There's other careers that I could have. I don't want to be a career politician. So if it comes time to get pressured by someone who's, a quote unquote higher ranking congressperson or, higher up in the whatever political establishment, I don't care. I don't like DC. I have the utmost respect for our Constitution, but I have a heavy degree of disdain for our institutions. And I think the time is now for us to purge them. So if people aren't mad at me, that probably means I'm just doing my job right.
That sounds almost exactly like what Trump said when he was. So it's great to hear that. Yeah. What do you think about term limits? What are your thoughts on that? Do you think it's possible to potentially get Congress to actually vote against themselves on something like term limits?
I think it's something we need to push heavily. So I've already signed the term limits pledge that limits me to 3 terms consecutively, and then I'll support and present legislation for term limits. I think we need it. I think half the mess that we're in right now is because we have a ruling class that the founders never intended for us to have. So I think it's an issue we really, really need to push heavily and have a robust debate about. But I think right now, the senators and the congressmen that have been, in power for decades upon decades, they just need to go. The woman I'm going after, her and I are the same age. And so from the time that she became an adult, she was off on this political path. And the only job that she's ever had has been as an elected official. So, I mean, that tells you everything you need to know. I don't think she's a horrible person. I just think we need to get rid of the political class needs to be absolutely gutted in this country.
Yeah, I've always thought that the long serving political class is basically a mouthpiece for the donors that are pushing them. Mostly, corporations and those types of folks. So glad you're on the same page. We're gonna invite Irishman addicted to, I forget what the rest of his name is, but he's coming on.
Hey.
Addicted to anime, right?
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, so Mr. Kent, I'd like to know your thoughts on your state's top Department of Transportation. Because here in Pennsylvania, we have a very bad Department of Transportation. I wonder what it's like in your state, in your area. What you think we should do if there's any problems with it.
Can you repeat yourself, Irishman? I couldn't quite make it out.
Okay. Yeah, your local Department of Transportation. If there's anything wrong with it, if there is, what you would do to fix it. What you think someone should do to fix it.
So you're asking what he thinks about his local Department of Transportation? If there's anything he would like to fix?
And if we can maybe tag on to that for you, Joe, like where do you see the boundary and the function of state and local departments of transportation when it comes to infrastructure versus federal? And also in that addressing Irishman's question of what needs to be fixed, especially at the local level.
That's actually a really good question for the 3rd congressional district. For those who don't know, like the 3rd is right on the Oregon-Washington border, so we have a lot of interstate commerce issues. So, for instance, the bridges are a big deal that cross the Columbia River between Oregon and Washington. So that's a place where I think the federal government does have a key role to play. We've had a lot of the states, duking it out as to who pays for what, and that's a place where I think the federal government does play a role because of the interstate commerce function. And if it's going to help increase the economy, which some of these projects would, especially a lot of the rural road development that would help the timber economy that I'd like to help get back online, get access to the ports along the Columbia River, get access to bridges for the free flow of commerce. I think that's a great role for the federal government to play. A lot of it gets murky with the religion of environmentalism and the EPA. That seems to consume most of our taxpayer dollars at the federal level, and that all that does is harm the economy, and it doesn't actually help anybody, get goods from point A to point B that are actually going to support our economy for our people.
Great answer. Hey, Joe, I just had a quick question about you brought up the timber industry. I know that Canada was one of our number one competitors for the timber industry, and I think NAFTA really kind of screwed us over. Do you think the USMCA helped the timber industry as far as kind of bringing down some of the cheap timber that was coming from Canada and some of the advantages that they had? I know that that's kind of near and dear to your guys' neck of the woods, pardon the pun, but what are your thoughts on the USMCA? Has it had a positive?
It gave it a fight. Yeah, it gave a ray of hope for an industry that's been choked for about 2 decades straight. And now people are kind of back to the status quo. So, to answer your question, the USMCA was great. but it could only be so effective. So it helped drive down some of the competition from Canadian timber, but our timber economy wasn't able to fully recover because of the repressive restrictions of the Environmental Protection Agency. So you still didn't see a lot of investment in timber mills, places where timber is actually like processed. So right now we're seeing this massive demand because interest rates are low for building. And so all the cost of wood and timber and lumber has gone way up, but the timber industry still doesn't want to make the investment to actually make more production facilities, which really help drive the economy and really could lower the price of timber and provide jobs. But they don't have the confidence right now to do that because of Joe Biden's, Green New Deal agenda and all that. So I think we need to come in and give the market, give the timber economy, and this probably goes for, I think, most natural resources economies, the confidence to expand their infrastructure, because that's going to build jobs. And then again, we're going to be competing at a much higher level, and that's where we need to be. So we need more USMCA type of trade deals, but then we also need to get the EPA out of our economy.
Yeah, I know that a lot of people look towards some managed forest processes instead of just a blanket no. Like some of them, especially in the Pacific Northwest, what they're doing with some of the timber there. So thanks for answering that question. I get the luxury of asking multiple questions because it's our server. So, all right. Next is going to be Palm. Let me invite Palm up real quick.
Hello, Joe. Thanks for joining us today. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Of course.
All right. Thank you. Two questions. One, what pre-COVID election safeguards were removed in Washington, such as mail-in voting, and what do you think? Well, the first question is what pre-COVID election safeguards need to be restored in Washington to have a legitimate vote, such as getting rid of Dominion, or in other states? And the other question is, what do you think of the Federal Urbanization Act and practically the plan for a federal takeover of U.S. suburbs by Democrat cities?
Yeah, so for your first question, unfortunately, out here in the Northwest, Washington, we've been doing the mail-in ballot thing for a while, and we've also been using Dominion machines for a while. And coincidentally, we've had, absolutely radical leftist governors destroying our state for quite a while now. So I would like to see my number one issue is election integrity. I don't think this country can move on until we adjudicate the presidential election of November of 2020. So when I get into Congress, I want to have a full congressional inquiry. I don't know if Congress is the ones that are supposed to adjudicate the election, but every other check on the election that was supposed to happen, they failed. They backed out of their duties like cowards. So our Congress has to adjudicate it, subpoena witnesses, subpoena evidence, put people on oath, lay it out for the American people. What I hope will come from that is people will see how bad our system is with these unsolicited mail-out ballots, us not following the precinct rosters, and then also what vulnerabilities these machines are. And I think we're seeing that now in Maricopa County. Like peak technocrat rule in our lives is Dominion telling us they can't turn over the administrative passwords so we can adjudicate a presidential election. Like that's insanity. So I want to present that to the people of this country so that they can demand from their state legislatures that we get voter ID, in-person voting, machines out of the process, and a hand count, and strictly following the precinct polling rosters so people are voting in the right place, and we count every legal ballot. Your other question, what was it? Oh, the urbanization. Yeah, so the Democrats want complete and total control. I mean, part of why they killed off so many of these industries like timber, like the energy sector, like coal, is these small towns that can support themselves off the natural environment. They're very independent. As Barack Obama said, they cling to their gods and their guns, and they can't be controlled. So if you kill off that industry and you make everybody move into a city, they're far easier to control. And then the suburbs, can become other little pockets for the Democrats. So they want to go in and put low-income housing in these places that further dilute and give them greater control and more federalization. So I'm very much against the Democrats' urbanization efforts.
Nice. We're going to invite up Gothics' Balance.
Hello?
Hello.
Is my okay, I'm here. Sorry. This goes back to the beginning, and with the questions on education. I just had a question about, you had spoken on denial of grants from the Department of Education. First, were you speaking about the Department of Education for the state of Washington, or the Department of Education Administration of the United States of America? And second, do you have any examples of the types of grants that you've specifically either worked with or seen denied, or would deny in the future, within blocking for these grants explicitly? Like any just examples off the top of your head. Thank you.
Yeah, so I was speaking about the U.S., the federal Department of Education. If we take the House and the Senate back and we have a majority, I would like to make a concerted effort to kill off the entire Department of Education. Again, this is a federal thing, and Article 1, Section 8 clearly lays out the duties and responsibilities of Congress. Education's nowhere in there. That doesn't mean the states can't pick it up. That doesn't mean the states shouldn't pick it up. But I think pushing education down to the lowest level possible is the right answer. It's just a huge bureaucracy that's been used to indoctrinate children for decades now at this point, in my opinion. As far as specific grants, the 1619 project has gotten specific grants. The critical race theory that has been put in by the National Education Association, I don't know the specific grant name off the top of my head, but that's been seeded into the Department of Education, and then also the National Teachers Unions to put into the social studies curriculums of schools. So those are the types of grants that we would go through. So if we can't kill off the Department of Education, then going through the specific grants and doing everything we can to deny them and delay them, just to exercise control over the budget and kind of trying to take the education back by denying funds, I think would be an effective way to at least stem the tide of what the left is trying to do.
What are your thoughts on school vouchers and kind of privatization of the schools at a local level as much as possible? What are your thoughts regarding that?
Yeah, full support. I mean, the school voucher system, or even a tax break, I think would be a great idea, especially in this last year. We've seen how absolutely evil the teachers unions are. And so I think when parents have the ability to pull their kids out of these schools that are either, the teachers unions are holding their kids hostage with these COVID lockdown restrictions, or they're teaching from a radical curriculum, when the parents pull them out, we can actually see which schools are suffering the most loss. That's another way to hold them accountable and to break up these horrible teachers unions. So full support for the voucher system. If you pull your kids out of public school, you should have control over where your kid gets an education and how those funds are spent, because we can really punish again via the pocketbook by pulling those funds away from bad schools and bad teachers.
Great. All right, we brought up Magus Boyd. Thanks for answering the question again. Magus, it's you.
Hey, how you doing? All right, so my couple questions for you, Joe. But basically, I'm tracking everything you're saying here. China and how they're pushing us into this technological revolution, how they're forcing us from every perspective of our economy and culture to race them to that infrastructure that's necessary to deliver internet to every square inch of the earth, and bring online and billions of devices on the Internet of Things network. How do we ensure that we're instilling American values into a system like that is question one. And then aside from all the other, grant talk and everything that you're discussing, and the term limits and everything, which is all great, the First Amendment has to be secured. How do we secure the First Amendment in a world like I'm describing that we are seemingly racing to with the Agenda 2030 stuff? the smart cities. You can go search.gov and look up smart cities.mil, look up smart cities under .mil, and you'll see clear plans. How do we instill the First Amendment again into society so that we can have a chance moving forward?
Yeah, so China is going to be extremely difficult. There's no one simple answer. The first thing that we need to do is have a strong, independent economy. So we have to bring back industry. America has never been able to win any of our major conflicts without having a strong economy. And right now, like I discussed at the beginning, our economy is so vulnerable right now because we're not producing anything. So for me, other than election integrity, because that's absolutely without free and fair elections, we have nothing in this society. That's my number one. Right behind that is restoring industry, so we get back to production, and then from there we go into protectionist trade policies. We bring back the tariffs. Any company that wants to do business in the United States, they can get a tax incentive for coming back to the United States, or they can absolutely get crushed by tariffs. It's just going to have to be that simple. So restore our economy, and then we have to break up big tech. That there's no two ways about it. The tech oligarchy. They are absolutely out of control in this country right now. The amount of control they have over us. They're going to use the vaccine passports, I think, to gain even more control. COVID gave them a great chance to take away a lot of our freedoms. And I think the government, I think Biden's administration is going to say, well, we let you guys take your masks off and go on the honor system of did you get your vaccine or not? But now it's spread too much. So we're going to have some way of tracking you. And here's going to be big tech with an ability to do that because we're so dependent on them. So I think we're on a very tight timeline to break up big tech. I think big tech must be broken up and we have to treat it like a public utility. This is another place where the federal government with transparent oversight, I think really comes in. The transparency is going to be has to be key with the American people. To make sure that we're not just building a second set of technocrats with an exorbitant amount of control. But again, restore our economy and break up big tech.
Follow up on the breakup of big tech. What does that look like? I mean, how do you break up something that has billions of users? Is it just splitting out their advertising, and then what do they do for revenue? So what does a breakup look like?
So I think it's going to look something like a public utility where everybody has equal access. No one can be kicked off from it. I mean, obviously, I know there's some examples of what Gavin Newsom was trying to do to people that weren't following his COVID rules with him shutting off public utilities. This is again where the transparent oversight comes in from Congress. But breaking up the big ones, Facebook, Google, and Twitter, those are some of the top ones that we need to break up and regulate the way. How much influence they can have. We need to get into get in at the algorithm level just to see how much control they have. I don't think there's any one simple answer. I think it's going to be complicated and I think it's going to be messy. But right now at this point, anything we can do to loosen their grip on Americans, because it's First Amendment, which is absolutely totally essential, but it's all the other controls they have and their ability to deplatform people, I think, because if you're deplatformed nowadays, like you can't do anything really unless you're some completely off the grid type of person. I mean, you can't have a bank account, you can't exchange commerce, you can't travel. So, I think that's something that we just need to put a ton of time and effort into and just start the process with, because if we continue to down the road, thoughtful debates about it, it's going to be too late and they're going to have complete and total control.
All right. Thanks so much for going into detail on that. We have DC Perspective up.
Yo, okay. So I actually have two questions, and I kind of wanted to divert from policy and get to know a little bit more about you and where you get your information and conservative media from. And I know I saw on your YouTube channel, goodness, now I'm forgetting, the book About Face was on your bookshelf behind you, and I'm a big fan of that book. So I wanted to know what your favorite book is, and then what news publishing organizations or magazines or journals you get your conservative punditry from, and how you go about that process. Because I know you want a combination of like both liberal and mainstream and conservative outlets, and I want to know, because I think that's important to how, if like Liz Cheney only reads National Review, well, then she's going to be acting like a total doofus.
Yeah. About Face is probably one of my favorite books. It not only has the multiple great war stories in there. I really like how Hackworth started out on the ground level, as an enlisted private, and then worked his way up in the ranks, learning lessons throughout his entire career. That eventually gave him a very unique perspective on how wrong we got it in Vietnam, and he had the integrity and courage to speak out about how wrong we were getting it in Vietnam when he really could have just gone along with what the rest of the brass was pushing. He probably would have made general because he was highly decorated, but he instead was like, hey, what we're doing is not working. My time in the government, my time in the military, I just saw too many people that either because of hubris or lack of a spine, for better terms, they were okay with us going along with these failed policies, in particular the global war on terror. I spent almost 5 years on the ground in Iraq, and Iraq is just it's a chronicle of failure, but people not admitting failure. It's a classic example of the gambler's fallacy. And Hackworth, what he did in Vietnam and then later on in his life before he died, unfortunately, I think was a testament to his courage to speak truth to power. So that's why that's my favorite book. As far as media goes, I try and be as diverse as possible. So I'm a big fan of a lot of the up and coming independent journalists. Tim Pool's a big one. Bannon's War Room is huge because he's got the original populist Trump crew in there, Bannon and Peter Navarro, those guys. Revolver's become a daily read as well. What they're doing over there, I think, has been pretty seminal. And then I also, I try and follow some of the folks on the left. I mean, MSNBC can be kind of cringeworthy, but if you watch Morning Joe and you watch Maddow, they actually give you a good deal of what the left is thinking, and kind of the narratives that they're putting out. So those are on my top ones. CNN's kind of garbage. Their narratives aren't even all that persuasive. So I think watching MSNBC from time to time, or at least following their main characters on Twitter, can kind of give you some insight on the way they're thinking and the moves that they're making. And I think that's absolutely key. Honestly, that's almost more key than listening to the stuff that I really like listening to.
Okay, great. Thanks so much, Joe. Also, I just wanted to remind everyone, if you're a vetted user and you haven't raised your hand yet, please do so. We're going to start getting some questions from some of the mods who have been working to get people in here so they can get those questions. And if we get through vetted users, we're going to circle back around to maybe a second set of questions. Unvetted users, again, welcome. I'm glad that you're here. You're able to listen. I'm not sure that we're going to be able to get to your questions since we haven't been able to actually vet you, but we're going to try and make sure that we vet you after this. So next up, we have one of our mods, Damien.
Thanks, Nux. And Joe, thanks for jumping in on this and making this such an easy process to get started. So Joe, I actually live in your district, which is why I was super excited when I found out who you were and what you were looking to do. But one question I have for you that'll kind of go around the election coming up next year is very often unengaged voters will simply pick their party member or an incumbent in an election. Since you're seeking to unseat someone who's technically in the same political party, how do you plan to make uninformed Republicans aware of your platform and then bring them over to your side, I guess?
We need people like you to volunteer, for one. That's my shameless plug for volunteers. But hey, a big thing I think is really just pointing out not just the Trump impeachment vote. That's becoming easier to articulate the more that we're seeing the left's narrative behind January 6th being weaponized against all Trump supporters, and Jamie is going along with that. So I think that needs to be brought to the light as well. But also just the fact that she has been against pretty much every core principle that a principled conservative and then a principled populist should have. I mean, she's been for immigration. She voted to halt the construction of the border wall. She just voted for amnesty for illegal immigrants in that horrible farm bill that they passed. She voted to keep our troops in Syria. She was silent on the Afghanistan vote that was anonymous. So I think she went with Liz Cheney. Just guessing. I'd love to ask her in person. I'd love to have her weigh in. And then she just recently came out to defend Liz Cheney and all these failed policies. As you're in the district, so this whole last summer, as summer and fall, as Antifa and BLM were burning Portland and marching into Vancouver at times, right next to Jamie's office, she didn't say anything. The only time she weighed in on the violence that was plaguing the Pacific Northwest surrounding our district was to side with the Democrats on a bill that would limit President Trump's ability to deploy the military. So, and then all the restrictions of 2020, all the economic crimes that have been committed against the working and the middle class, she's just said nothing on. She comes back in and she tries to do these transactional, little projects here and there, these fish ladders and these fish hatcheries, and she talks about sea lions. And it's all well and good stuff to talk about, but anytime we need her to stand tall, she's not there. She crumbles. So that's the dichotomy that I really want to bring to light. And honestly, I want to debate her as much as possible. I'm not sure if she's going to be down with that, but I've made the challenge, and I'd like to give her that opportunity, any format, any time, any place. So yeah, that's the plan. And then please volunteer.
Great. All right, Donald, you're up next.
Can you guys hear me?
Yep, of course.
All right. First of all, thank you, Mr. Kent, for joining us. It's a huge pleasure. So I just got a couple of questions. So the first one is, I just want to come back to the big tech, and I want to stay with that theme. I personally believe that in addition to big government being a problem, I also think big corporations are a problem. And when I say that, I mean like Amazon, Walmart, big tech, also big defense. And I guess the sub question is, do you believe in like the existence of a military industrial complex? And do you believe this is a problem with big corporations in general dictating social, economic, and political policy, and essentially removing the free market? And if you do, what would you want to do about it? And my second question is I know a lot of people want to know about this. I want to personally know your stance on like three-letter agencies and federal bureaucracy, like the CIA, FBI, the ATF. And do you believe they have overstepped their duties? And do you believe there needs to be some quote-unquote trimming in the government bureaucracy?
Yes, starting with big tech and the big corporations, I think there's some absolute monopoly issues there. And look, these big corporations, the reason why they've sided with the left recently is, or since Obama came into power, really, is because the far left has completely and totally abandoned, the far left and the mainstream left has abandoned the working and the middle class. So the flow of legal and illegal immigration that these big companies, these big corporations benefit from, that's just hurt the working and the middle class. So I think we do need to do some restructuring of that. They also benefit greatly from all the production lines being overseas, which again hurts the working and the middle class. So I think they're monopolies too that we need to take a hard look at, give them an incentive to change their ways and, do right by the working class and the middle class. And if they're not going to take that, then I think that is where the government can come in and do some, play more of a key role in breaking them up and making them work for the people. Same thing with big tech. We already talked about that. As far as the three-letter agencies go, so the three-letter agencies do need a good deal of overhaul. They really just need Congress to play much more of a key oversight role. I think the DOJ and the intelligence community has been weaponized against conservatives going back to Obama's administration, especially when we look at the full origins of the Russian dossier and what they did to President Trump, what they did to General Flynn. I served in the intelligence community. I was in the CIA for a little bit. I plan on making that my second career. There's great Americans in those agencies that are at risk in their lives every day, collecting intelligence and doing covert action for this country. And there's a viable role for that. There really is. A lot of that will help keep us out of stupid wars. But the problem is you get these people that are professional bureaucrats and politicians that get appointed to these roles, and they take those tools and they abuse their power, and they're able to walk right over Congress because there's so few people in Congress. Even Congress men and women who have the best of intentions, they get either intimidated or they just get slow rolled because they don't understand how government actually works. They get these really impressive looking generals in there that come in and say, well, we need to be at war absolutely everywhere in the Middle East. Otherwise 9/11 is going to happen. And you don't want to be responsible for another 9/11. And these guys are like, well, man, I don't know. This guy's a general. What do I know? So I'm just going to listen to what he has to say. Well, that's not the case at all. You need people that are from the inside, that are well-versed in how these issues actually work and other solutions. And the intelligence community is the exact same way. Like we constantly hear there's intelligence chatter saying that there's going to be another QAnon insurrection on the Capitol. So therefore, we need all these extreme vetting matters to go through people's social media to really trample on their First Amendment rights, but to make sure that there's no further terrorism. Well, if we had people that actually understood how intelligence worked, we could bring in the leaders of the intelligence community on an open session of Congress and say, no, man, show me the intel. Don't just say, well, there's intel. I've collected intel. I've written intel. Like I know how this works. So we need people from the inside, and there's tons of good patriotic people in these organizations. The FBI needs a serious overhaul, just the way that it's been weaponized against the American people. I think the ATF, like if we actually just follow the Second Amendment, we don't need the ATF. So I do think there's a good deal of house cleaning that needs to be done, but we need people who understand the system that can do the house cleaning. Same thing with the military industrial complex. There's precautions that we can put on how senior leaders exit the military, like some sort of a period where they can't go work for a defense contractor. That needs to be absolutely gone through and scrutinized, especially when these guys move from being a 4-star general to on a board at a defense agency and then back into the Department of Defense. That's just absolutely ridiculous. And it does lead to the military industrial complex. It does lead to there being massive financial incentives for keeping us at war.
Great answer, Joe. So I had a question from another mod who is unable to ask it because of his. So it's kind of along the same lines. He asks, to the average American, the intel agencies seem very polarized at the top end of leadership. With your unique experience in the intel community, do you think the agencies are effective as they are, and do you think that they're impartial as intended? If not, how do we fix them? He appreciates the service of you and your late wife, blue skies and fair winds. He's another veteran such as myself, so I kind of echo that sentiment. Thanks a lot for your service, and sorry about your sacrifice. I know that you'll do good going forward.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for that. So our, intelligence community, it is effective at what it does, but the problem is the polarization in the politics. So the way that we go about appointing a lot of these people to head up these agencies, it does no justice to the professionals that actually have a very unique skill and are making sacrifices. So I do think we need to revamp the way that we select these directors of the Central Intelligence Agency, the directors of the FBI. Again, that's just really where Congress comes in, because the president should be able to appoint his people that are going to help him further his agenda because they're part of the executive branch. But Congress's oversight role is absolutely key. We can't have guys like, Comey and guys like Brennan who have access to grind and who they've been political operatives their entire life. James Comey wasn't out there as a FBI agent, kicking down doors of drug dealers and terrorists as a G-man. And Brennan had been an analyst, and the analytical corps is a key part of the CIA, but his analytical time was limited compared to his time chasing the Beltway circuit. He wasn't overseas analyzing critical intelligence. That guy was working at very political levels. He was very much a political operative. So it's the political class that we need to get out of the ranks of the defense industry, the intelligence community, and then our law enforcement agencies, because those tools are way too powerful to trust to people that have massive, unchecked political ambitions. And again, that's where Congress comes in. That's why there's oversight committees, and Congress needs to get way more proactive in those roles.
Great answer. All right, we're going to invite Craig up on the stage since he hasn't asked a question yet. Or I don't think I've ever heard Craig speak.
Hey, I'm a guy.
Okay, cool.
Hey, all right, cool. So how do you feel about mining natural resources like oil and gold and other standard ventures? And do they fit into your economic vision for the future?
Yeah, so absolutely. So I'm pro mining, pro us using our resources. I mean, that doesn't mean I want us to, go absolutely crazy and deplete all of our resources. Again, I put more trust in the people and the industries that are responsible for making their living and feeding their families off of these resources than I am the EPA. to absolutely kill off entire industries. So I am very pro us using our resources here that we have in this country. Like this nation, our 3,000 mile wide land island is blessed by divine providence. I mean, we have so much natural resources here. For us not to use them is an absolute slap in the face to men and women who want to go work for a living and provide for their families. So I'm pro responsible mining and harvesting of our resources, and there's responsible ways to do it. I think the religion of environmentalism and then the federal government have painted this picture that it's all or nothing. We're either going to cut down every single tree in the Pacific Northwest, or we can't cut down any. Because if we cut down, even just a few of them, then we're going to kill off the environment, and global warming is going to take over, and we're all going to die. So therefore, we just have to have large swaths, the vast majority controlled by the federal government. We can't use any of it. The energy sector is the same way: coal, oil, fracking. Biden killing off the Keystone Pipeline day one. There's a way to go about conservation and environmental protections without it slipping into full government control.
Good. All right, we're going to invite Greedo up. Greedo, you're next.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so just one quick question. Has Trump given you a possible timeline for an endorsement, or like a set goal he wants to see, or is it just kind of like, we'll just see how it goes and play it by ear, or what's the basic plan outline for it?
Strong full second quarter, because our first quarter, it wasn't a complete quarter, so he wants to see a strong second quarter of fundraising. He didn't give me a hard number, but he said just make it as strong as possible, to give him the confidence that I can mobilize the ground game here in Washington State. I feel like we're on track, but my plan is to run every day like I'm in second or third place, because I know President Trump's a winner, and he wants to see people that are willing to put in the work. So that's what I'm attempting to do, right now.
Great. I know I'm going to be donating shortly after the AMA. So if anybody else is out there thinking about sending 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 bucks to Mr. Kent's way, I'm sure that'd be great. And I was able to come on and do this. Free, we're going to ask you to come up. Actually, I'm sorry, Kekistani American is up right now. And then Free, you're next. Go ahead, Kek.
Hello, Mr. Kent. Thank you very much for coming to this AMA and speaking with us. My question is, well, I'm cautiously optimistic, and I've enjoyed many of the things that you've talked about thus far, especially dismantling Department of Education and things like that. I was wondering if I could get any strong commitment from you on a topic that many candidates that otherwise say many of the right things and appear to align with their constituents on many issues, they ultimately disappoint us in, and that's spending. Even relatively conservative, otherwise seemingly principled candidates seem to have a weak spot here. For whatever reason, it's difficult for federal elected officials to stay away from voting for omnibus bills that spend trillions of dollars and far more, and increase our debt far more than we're capable of sustaining. So the question is, first, what is your position on that? Do you have any concern about our future in that instance? And the second is there any hard promise that we could extract from you tonight in that area?
Yeah, so I mean, I agree with you. I have the exact same concerns. The national debt, I think, is a national debt coupled with the fact that we're not producing anything anymore. I think that's like our biggest local issue, because it's hurting Americans every day, but it's also our biggest national security issue. So it's something we actually absolutely have to make a priority out of. I'm actively seeking to join the Freedom Caucus. I attended the House Freedom Caucus's fundraiser in Mar-a-Lago. That is the group that I would align with in Congress. And I do not want to introduce any new spending bills. And also, I'll say it. We have to not get rid of, but we have to heavily regulate and take a hard look at our entitlement spending. The whole Social Security system is based on an old model of when people get their retirement, and then Medicare and Medicaid and Medicare for and healthcare for all has become an absolute just drain and burden on the system, and it's something that nobody wants to address because you're talking about taking away money from some people, and that will cost you votes. But if we don't start having these honest conversations right now, then it's going to be too late. In particular, the way that the debt spending is out of control, we are all already overtaxed. So the government really needs to learn to make do with the taxes that they're already taking before they ask for more money or before they go into debt any further. So, yeah, like I said, I already signed the term limit pledge, and I don't plan on being in DC forever. So if I go in there and I say no to every single spending bill, and that makes me wildly unpopular because people feel like I took money out of their pocket, then you know what? So be it. That's my commitment for going forward into this election.
All right, Free, you're up.
All right, I have two questions. The first one's kind of yes or no. Number one, have you ever read the Federalist and Anti-Federalist papers? And then number two, the last paragraph of Federalist Paper number 63 asserts that in the unlikely situation that the Federal Senate is able to transform itself through gradual usurpations into an aristocratic and independent body, which the foresight of man cannot guard against, the House of Representatives, with the people on their side, will at all times be able to bring back the Constitution to its primitive form and principle. Should we strive to eliminate or reform some of the constitutional amendments passed after the first 10? For example, the 13th Amendment eliminated almost all slavery. However, it makes slavery constitutionally legal as a punishment for crime. The 17th Amendment put federal senators to a popular vote instead of being appointed by the state legislature. Would it be appropriate to pick and choose which ones stay and go, or should the House aim to strip them back to the first 10 amendments in the Bill of Rights and let the new ones be properly implemented over time like was done before? Thank you.
I've read take a look at that. As far as opening up the Constitution and going through the latter parts, I think it's really interesting to talk about, and I would have to do a lot more research, to be quite honest with you. And I think we have really pressing issues with the economy and then with election integrity to get to. Not to say that that's not important, but I would have to do a ton more research. I'm wary of opening up the Constitution to severe editing, just because I'm not exactly sure what the other side's going to do and what kind of horse trading that's going to result in. So I would definitely have to do a lot more research on that one.
Great, thanks so much. I have a question myself. I want to jump off a little bit from what Free was talking about. We've seen over the history of our republic, states' rights have been eroded significantly, whether through legislation, whether through SCOTUS decisions, or they've just sort of come about where states haven't taken responsibility and federal government has done a power grab. Do you see I guess first off, do you see a significant need for states to reassert themselves, even potentially up to simply nullifying and ignoring federal law or executive order? And two, if you see that need and believe it's beneficial to the republic, what's the path to get there to reassert strong statehood?
I agree. I think the states do need to start reasserting themselves much, much more. The left really likes the federal control, and the left is running right now off of a lot of ignorance and laziness. They say that, Joe Biden says, like, you have to go get a vaccine, you have to wear a mask. And people are like, well, half the country is like, well, probably even more than half the country is like, well, I guess he said it, so we have to do it. It's like, well, no, none of that actually is real. You don't have to do any of that. And the states never had to lock down their economies. So I do think states need to reassert themselves much, much more. It's well within their rights to say no to a lot of the things that the federal government is trying to do. And then I think it's on us at the federal government level to have the courage of conviction and knowledge of the Constitution to say, hey, like we're only going to vote on things that are within the purview of the federal government as outlined in the Constitution. So you can say I'm mean all day long because I'm not going to, support the bill that pertains to childcare, but that's a state's issue or a local issue. I'm not saying I'm against that concept, but as a U.S. congressman, I don't think that that's the type of thing. I'm just using that as an example, but half the stuff, probably even more than half the stuff that the Congress is talking about right now, doesn't even fall under their purview. Meanwhile, issues that affect interstate commerce, that affect trade deals, tariffs, that affect war, that's well within their purview, they treat as a sideshow. So I think really educating our people is number one. Number two is states pushing back, and then people that are getting elected into federal office knowing what their job is and what their job isn't is key.
Great, thank you. I that's the conversation that we have here a lot is our federal representatives understanding what their role is. So that's great for me personally to hear. I just want to remind everyone we've gotten through first round questions. So if anyone hasn't raised their hand, if they have a first question, now's your chance. We don't have very much longer with Mr. Kent, who's been so generous to visit us tonight. And my other question for you, Mr. Kent, is what question have we not asked, what topic has not come up that you would like to take a moment and talk to us about that's key for you?
So I think we've hit a lot. As far as the endless wars go, that's a near and dear to me. I think we need to get out of our endless wars as soon as possible. I'm skeptical about Joe Biden's ability or will to get us out by September 11th. I mean, then we can have a whole different discussion how stupid that date was to pick. But he's left our troops overseas in Afghanistan for another fighting season, essentially, which I'm afraid is going to put them in more danger. I hope nothing happens. But then we still have guys deployed in Syria right now that at any minute could get caught in between, the Russians, in between the Assad regime and Iran. So it's just an absolute trap right now. Same thing with foreign aid. We're trying to re-enter the Iran deal, which has led to Iran having more money for the proxies, which is resulting in violence in Israel right now. And then also like our relationship with the Iraqi government, we're letting them get away with absolute murder while they give Iran access to the world economy. So I think heavy oversight from Congress and foreign relations and letting the country go to war and authorizing force is absolutely huge. Something else big is a return to celebrating our Judeo-Christian values in our country. Like we have a separation of church and state. We don't have a national religion, but we can't deny history and our actual roots of our Judeo-Christian values. The more that we stray from that being our guiding principle, the further we are going to go down this path where the state and the federal government are replaced as people's families and as their gods. So I think we just really need to, as the conservative movement, lean into heavily and educate people about our roots being Judeo-Christian in this country. I think that's absolutely key.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Next up, we have Moonfire, one of our mods.
Hi, pleasure to meet you, Mr. Kent. So my question is about local races, right? So do you think the Republican Party should be doing more to push in races at a smaller local level, such as school boards, university trusteeships, county commissioners? Mostly because these are some of the bodies that affect who gets hired for what teaches our children going forward. And we see the effect of the left having a stranglehold over these institutions and pushing their agendas in them. And maybe we could start fighting back on that level. Do you think that should be a priority for the Republican Party going forward?
Do absolutely, and then moreover, I think we need people from our movement, from the whatever you want to call it, the populist nationalist, the Trump movement, the MAGA movement. We need to take over these Republican parties and become precinct chairman, and then run for all those local elections, and then get deeply involved into our communities. We've always been deeply involved in our communities as conservatives. We just have, I think, really missed the ball on staffing the field when it comes to those local elections, like you said. So, for instance, we have upcoming county sheriff election here in Clark County that I'm looking at very closely and talking to some of the candidates, and I'm pretty excited about. And then we also have, school board elections and all those types of things. So I think we do have to get our movement much more energized to take over the GOP and then just start taking over a lot of these local elections to start to fight the Democrats back on terrain that they've controlled for far too long.
Good. All right, we're going to invite Kemox back for one more question. I believe it's on a very specific thing. Go ahead, Kemox. You should be able to talk now.
Sorry, I had my mic muted. All right, what would you do with HR 1?
HR1,
HR1, we need to destroy it. I mean, HR1 is absolutely, the election bill. So essentially, it's a copy and paste of 2020. So the Democrats want to make 2020 of massive unsolicited mail-out voting the norm. And there's a bunch of other goodies in there, like getting rid of precinct rosters so we don't know who's supposed to vote where. It just opens the door wide open for widespread fraud and irregularities. But that's their plan, right? So we have to do everything we can to call out, educate people on what this is, and then destroy it. The states need to run their elections. Again, that goes back to my number one issue being election integrity. When we are able to finally fully adjudicate the election of 2020, the American people will see the evidence and they won't be able to deny that we have to reform our election system, and it has to be controlled at the states. In-person voting, voter ID, get the machines out of it, full hand count, full transparency.
Sounds good. Pranov, you're up next. And then I think we have just the time for a couple more small ones. So go ahead, Pranov.
Yeah, so I was wondering, so if you're gonna make laws with the other House Republicans, are you going to make your laws like applicable to just Washington, or are you going to try and represent like states like California, Nevada, like the blue states? Because there are Republicans in these blue states that people seem to forget about. Are you like, when you made your pledge to represent Washington's third, did you make the pledge to only represent Washington's third, or like republicanism as a whole?
To support and defend the Constitution of the United States, and that's going to be for every American citizen in every state. The thing about Washington Third is I think we are kind of a microcosm of so much of the state right now. We have we have urban, we have rural, but we also have one population center in Seattle, which it's not part of my district, but it dictates so much of what happens in the state, and the rest of the state, by and large, is conservative, but we're getting absolutely choked off by these urban centers. So I mean, when I go and I fight for Washington Third, and I'm partnered up with other America First Republicans, we are fighting for, I think, the vast majority of this country. Because I think every state you look at, especially the blue ones, it's not a real blue state. There's a couple of major blue cities that are just choking the life out of, what the backbone of this country is. So yeah, support and defend the Constitution of the United States, and then represent my people from my district, but all the American people.
Nice. Next, we've got Indigo Spirit. She's ready to come on and ask a question. See if she can figure out how to accept the invite at the top of the screen, hopefully. There you go.
Thank you.
Yep.
Hello. I'm curious, what sets you from the other two candidates for running?
Can you repeat that?
Yeah. I think you said yeah.
Is it what
sets
separates
you from the other two candidates?
So what separates me from the other candidates that are running in this race is leadership, and leadership under the most stressful conditions. So I spent a little bit over 21 years in special operations, most of it deployed. So my job was to make decisions in high stress environments, sometimes under the most stressful environments. A bad day when you're overseas is either you or someone that you care deeply about doesn't come back alive, and you have to get up and get back in the game moments later and continue to make decisions. Also, the ability to span multiple levels of leadership and knowledge is something that I did for my entire military career. So I enlisted as an enlisted guy, as an infantryman, as a grunt, worked up my way as a non-commissioned officer in special forces, spent 11 years as an enlisted guy, spent the remainder of my career as a warrant officer. So my job was to essentially be the bridge between management, or between labor and management. So I had to be in the trenches fighting with the guys, but then be able to go back and brief a general, an ambassador, a leader of the intelligence community on what was going on the ground, and then get the guys the support they needed, and then the higher ups the knowledge that they needed to make good decisions. My job was to speak truth to power. To me, that ties in nicely with the role of a congressman. So I have to stay tied in at the local level of what the timber industry needs, be able to go out and talk to loggers, talk to fishermen, then move into our cities and talk with our business leaders, and then go to DC and know how to navigate that system. Something else I think that uniquely qualifies me for this is I know how to fight. We are in a fight right now. Conservatives for far too long have been playing by these gentlemen's rules, while the left play by absolute Chicago politics. You know, we are consistently bringing knives to gunfights, and the Democrats have just been absolutely hammering us. So I've spent my entire adult life fighting complex information wars, and I don't think anyone else on the ticket has that experience. I also personally know what it feels like to be on the receiving end of failed policy. So my wife would be alive right now had unelected bureaucrats not disobeyed the commander in chief. So when it comes to policy failure, I know exactly what that feels like. And that's something that, you know, I will be damned if I let that happen on my watch to members of my community or to this country ever again. So for me, I have as much skin as you can have in the game at this point. And that's the time that we're living in right now, because what the left is trying to do to this country, it's a form of warfare. So it can't be your first day in a battle or in combat to go fight what the left is throwing at us right now. That's what sets me apart. Also, no one put me up to do this. I saw the state that our country was in, and I Googled, how do you become a congressman? And I made an FEC filing based off that. And I have been absolutely in a dead sprint ever since then. Other candidates, they have backing, they have other motivation here and there. They need encouragement. That's not me. So that's what sets me apart from the other folks that are in the race.
Great stuff. All right, I think we have time for one more question. We're going to take it from Captain Commander. And then afterwards, we're going to have everybody head on over to voice chat to just talk and discuss about the AMA. But after Captain Commander goes, we'll let Mr. Kent close it up. And he almost sounded like he just did it, but I'm sure he's got more to say. So Captain Commander, go ahead and accept the invite at the top of the screen. There you go. Now you can talk.
Hello, can everyone hear me?
Yep, go ahead.
Hi, Mr. Kent. It's well, first of all, it's an honor to talk to you, and everybody else, I think, put it in words better than I ever could. Just really, I want to thank you for what you're doing, and I'm sorry about your wife and everything. It's yeah, I'm not good with words. But my question is, well, I've thought about possibly running for some form of office in the future. It's not something I'd want to do, but as an American, I want to do my part to help drain the swamp in any way I can. I live in blue state hell, New Jersey. So my question is, how would, we'll say for Congress, because you're running for Congress, how would somebody go about running for Congress to help drain the swamp? I guess maybe specifically like in a blue state hell, because I know this battle that us Americans were fighting, the politicians, the left, this is going to keep going on for years. And President Trump, I know he's been crucified by the media, like Nixon was back in the 60s by the media. And back then we didn't have any kind of internet where conservatives can talk to each other. There was no conservative news channels or anything. My question for you is, how would I go about that, sir?
What was your question? How would you go about running, or how would you go about supporting? It got a little choppy there.
I think it was for running. I think people are inspired by seeing you run for Congress, and they're curious how
Gotcha. Okay.
steps and getting going for that.
Yeah, I think the first thing to do is to really see or talk with folks in your community and start to get your name out there, as much name recognition as you can. I think the America First movement is really starting to take a firm foothold in the GOP architecture. And a lot of people that have traditionally, I think, been in the GOP architecture, I think, are starting to realize that, and they agree with it because they saw what President Trump was able to do in just his short period of time. So I think there's some places where there's going to be more opportunities to plug into the existing GOP architecture. But then after that, it's name recognition and then being able to run some funds. And this is a full-time job too. So kind of getting yourself in a personal position where you can make a commitment of time that this is, kind of all you do. That's the biggest advice I have for right now, because I'm kind of learning as I go as well. But I appreciate your kind words, and I'm glad I've been able to inspire a few folks here and there to get more politically involved, because I think we're the majority of the country, and we just need to start acting like it and get vocal.
Great.
Yeah,
Well,
thanks so much, Joe. And Sublime is gonna wrap us up. But one thing that I just wanted to say real quick, it's been an honor to have you here. This has been an excellent 90 minutes, and I'd also just ask, as you're connecting with other officials and other candidates, let them know that we're here, and we want to hear from them. And we have people that are longing to support and longing to donate, and for those that are local to them or in their state, longing to volunteer. So again, thank you for being the first for us this season and taking the time.
Yeah, I just want to kind of echo this sentiment that Nux had said. He couldn't have said it better. Thanks for coming on, and on behalf of the whole server, we thank you for your time and appreciate it. If you want to leave us with some last words, go for it.
Well, thank you guys so much for having me on. This has actually been really fun. My first time on a Discord. So thank you for being here, and then thank you for engaging with me and for all your questions. The only thing I'll close with is, hey, our country is absolutely in crisis right now. We talked about the cultural assault that we're under. I think we're all aware of that every day. We're aware of what they did in 2020 with the election. All that's coming out, and that's why Joe Biden and the far left, they're moving so fast, because they know their time is numbered, and that's why they're trying to crush us with this media narrative that there's no hope and that they have full control. So just realize that's part of the game. And I think there's a lot of folks in our movement who are, demoralized after 2020, but we can't let the media win. They want us to think that there's no way that we can ever have a fair and free election again. And so there's no point in voting. I hear that stuff all the time. That's the left's playbook. That's what they want us to believe. But the reality is, we are the majority of the country. The reason why the left is pushing this whole critical race theory and these racial tensions and all those narratives so heavily is because the last thing they want us to do is to wake up and realize that regardless of what color you are, all of us working class and middle class people are being screwed by the same set of politicians and the same corporations year after year after year. That's why they want us divided. That's why they want us full of low information. So I think it's incumbent upon all of us to really push that right back in their face and say that, hey, we're not demotivated. We don't believe you. We are unified, the working class, the middle class, the deplorables. We know that we're the backbone of this country, and we deserve better, and we demand better. So we're going to get out there, we're going to get mobilized, and we're going to take this country back. And, I'm honored to be part of it in this capacity, and I need all of your help. So if you can, please go to joekentforcongress.com. There's a donate tab on there. There's multiple platforms you can donate from. There's even a PO box you can send a check to. Even if it's just $5, $10, $15, whatever it is, it really helps us. My opponent's up against she has a huge war chest right now from the establishment. And then once I beat her, I'm going to be up against the far left and their money. And I want to be able to fight this fight with all individual contributions from my fellow Americans. So once again, at the website's joekentforcongress.com. I really appreciate you guys providing this format, and I hope to come back sometime soon. Thank you very much.
Great, and you're welcome to stay in the server and chat with the folks anytime you want to. All right, thanks everybody.
That sounds great. Yeah, I'll probably drop back in.
Yep, for sure. Everybody go ahead and jump on over to voice chat. You guys can continue the conversation over there if you want. And thanks, Joe, for your time, and everybody enjoy.